Now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show, where founders, leaders, and high performers come to learn how to break through mental blocks, build the inner clarity, and design a life that actually feels good to live and not just impressive on paper. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today we're going to be diving into exclusive insights with real methods, mindsets, and strategies that our guest actually uses to create lasting success from the inside out. And if you care about performance, purpose, and personal growth, just make sure you subscribe on whatever platform you're watching this on, because this is not just surface level motivation. This is deep work. Now, I'm really excited to introduce my guest today, who is literally known as Morpheus. Now, Ian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Prosper. It's so good to be with you today. Really excited about our conversation.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, when I heard Morpheus was coming to the show, I didn't realize that it was going to be you. I was thinking, wait a minute, have we grown that much as a platform? But now we are stuck with what we have. So this is the best that we could do on short notice, Ian.
Totally. I it's like, did you want the Greek god of dreams? Did you want, the Sandman? Did you, because that's also another Morpheus, or did you want the one from the Matrix?
Right. You see, when you say it like that, it means either you're going to wake up our audiences, like from the Matrix, or we're about to be offered the red pill or the blue pill on the Online Prosperity Show. But jokes aside, I think this episode is for anyone who feels like maybe they've achieved a lot on the outside, but yet they still feel stuck, restless, or disconnected on the inside. So as I said earlier on, I'm joined by Ian Hatton, CEO of Totally Morpheus, a man who's helped people rewire their mindset, reprogram their identity, and consciously design their reality. And here's what's interesting. Most people come to Ian when something isn't working anymore, even though on paper they might appear as if they are, a resounding success. So I can't wait to hear all about how you do this and how you actually help people. Now, let's just get started with this. Take us a little bit back before Totally Morpheus existed. Who was Ian Hatton before all this inner work began, and what was your life like actually on a day-to-day basis?
So thank you, Prosper. I'm going to start with my IT career. I was in the IT industry for nearly 20 years, 19 years, and initially some sort of technical roles, but ultimately leadership and then marketing. And I managed to see in that corporate space, my last 5 years was with Microsoft. And I managed to see in that corporate space leadership done really badly, including the way at one point I was leading my own team. And this was quite a wake-up call. And I realized there had to be a better way. There had to be a better way for people to be more authentic in their lives that they live. And that if you really have this authentic leadership, it's not just going to be at work. It's going to actually be in your parenting, in your marriage, in your community. So you want to be generating something that is from the internal to the external. And, some people would say, I've heard John C. Maxwell is quoted as saying, everything rises and falls on leadership. Well, Ian C. Hatton says leadership rises and falls on self-leadership. Because if we do not go on the inner journey, we are not building the capacity to really influence in all directions. And that's the key that was kind of missing. And so I went and did a master's degree in organizational leadership and left Microsoft, and I was now ready to change the world. Except I hadn't been on that inner journey. And so I hit so many problems and frustrations and things that were kind of working. And people were saying, wow, this message is so good, but somehow it wasn't making the impact that it needed to make. And so some 8 years, in fact, 9 years later, I went through a deep, deep crisis. My marriage ended. My business partner and I split ways. I had been involved in a spiritual community. I left that as well. And for the first time in my life, properly looked in the mirror and said, who am I really? What is this self-leadership thing that I've been avoiding? And by the way, one of the reasons I've been avoiding it is I had an obesity problem. And I thought, well, I don't have self-control. So how could I have self-leadership? Of course, in that year, it was 2011, I woke up to the fact that if I don't teach leadership as control, why would self-leadership be self-control? Leadership is influence. And so self-leadership would be, how can I influence myself and my growth? And so I went on this inner journey, learning to love myself, learning to lead myself, learning to make myself my number one job every single day. And when I did that, everything started to change. And so what happened is that even though I was teaching the same leadership programs before and after this event, using the same techniques, my impact ramped up dramatically, where people were starting to come back to me and say, oh, but this thing, it didn't just change my team. It changed my marriage. It changed my parenting. Because now something was different. And the difference was I had changed, not my techniques, but I had changed.
Thank you so much for taking us through that, because this just gives us a glimpse into who you became along the journey. Now, a lot of people that end up in a situation and a position that you're in, they usually have maybe some sort of a societal or family expectation for them to achieve and keep achieving, and at the expense of them looking inward. Now, I'm going to ask you with this, with utmost love and respect, was that an expectation in your upbringing for you to actually excel and be some sort of a public success?
It wasn't so much a pressure, but it was societal more than my family setting. But in the society, and especially working for a company like Microsoft, you know, Microsoft is all consuming. You work for them, you've got to drink the Kool-Aid, you know. It took me more than 10 years after leaving Microsoft before I was comfortable to even buy an Apple product, because up until that time, I had to still be the Microsoft person. You know, it was like a whole detox almost. Not to say that Microsoft's toxic, but the corporate world sets these expectations and wants you to be this high success. And they forget that the most sustainable success is when you've built capacity on the inside. And I had not done that. And that's why I ended up going through that crisis.
I can imagine, because, I mean, obviously all that you're building, it's like that Easter chocolate that is nice and round, but is hollow inside. And once...
Great example.
Yes. And once, you know, something breaks it from the outside, the whole thing crumbles. And I sort of see it from what you're saying there. But younger Ian would have had aspirations. Obviously, Microsoft wasn't the end game. You know, I talked to a lot of people. Somebody would have wanted to be a fireman, a doctor, a nurse. What was the actual aspiration?
So the natural thing would have been to want to be a pilot, because all little boys want to be a fireman or a pilot or something. Because my father was a pilot. So, you know, not his whole career, but there was something that he had done. And, but I reached a point, I think I was about 8 or 9 years old. And believe it or not, I was actually sitting in a church service, 8 or 9 years old. And I watched this person speaking from the stage. And I went, I want to do that.
Right.
Not, I want to be a pastor, but I want to speak on a stage and inspire people and grow people and liberate people and that kind of thing. And it wasn't an ego thing. it was just simply, I'm going to do that. That's what I'm here for, kind of thing. And then additionally, I used to listen to the radio a lot. I wasn't big on television. I loved the radio. And I would hear people being interviewed on the radio, and I would go, I want to be interviewed on the radio. Not I want to be an interviewer, I want to be interviewed. And I realized very quickly that there was something about I've been given a voice, a way of speaking that can actually make a difference. And as a little boy, I then obviously, as we so often do through teenagerhood and all our insecurities, maybe in younger years, we lose touch with some of that. But a lot of it reemerged while I was at Microsoft. I was doing big product launches. I was being interviewed on television, the radio, and it just kind of revived. And that was maybe the other reason why I switched industries, was because I did have this passion to make a difference in people's lives through my speaking and being interviewed and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And while you maybe were on your career path to, at Microsoft, as a young kid, you would have noticed those people as role models, for yourself towards what it is that you wanted to do. Were there any people within the corporate space that you also then looked at and you're like, you know what, that corner office, you know what, that company car or whatever it is, was there any aspiration to keep within the corporate space?
Yes, and that was clearly a conditioning. Great question, by the way, because I very often took a promotion for the status,
right?
Not necessarily because it was going to be where I would make my biggest impact. And that, I think, resulted in some failures because I'd taken the promotion for the wrong reason, and maybe some divergence of why it took me so long to find what I'm really here for. And so, yes, it was enticing. And yes, of course, I want the nice cars and, and the nice office and all of that kind of thing. But what I realized is that in some cases, I was chasing that. I hadn't done the inner work yet. So I was chasing that status rather than what I really live for, which is impact. So, state and impact might come with status, but it's almost a spin-off. But chasing status on its own did not serve me well.
Oh, I can imagine, because you're chasing something that is already not real to start off with. And by the time, it's like chasing a mirage, you know what I mean? You're like, oh, there it is. And you can't even grasp it. And there's always yet another goal to hit as soon as you hit that sort of milestone. And if you're not content inside, that obviously, becomes like a downward spiral. Now, fish don't see the water that they swim in, Ian. And obviously, while you were doing that, everyone was doing what they needed to do for survival, and also were playing the corporate ladder game and things of that nature. But were there other people that you were seeing that were maybe content, or they had their inner work done and inside, and you now started noticing, wait a minute, what am I missing in this whole grand scheme of things?
Yeah, exactly. And it was a minority, to be honest. I think a lot of people were just in it to pursue their own financial goals and that kind of thing. But what I began to notice as the people who were more effective, they were comfortable in what they were doing. They were not just posturing or playing games. They were actually very much just relaxed in being themselves and bringing, if I can put it, their essence to what they were doing. Natural leaders. I think, for example, at one stage, I was working with in fact, we did a whole lot of work together in my last years at Microsoft, where I was working with the general manager of Microsoft South Africa. And we had so much fun because he would bring who he really was to what he was doing. He was not, yes, he was climbing the ladder, and he got promoted to go to Redmond, where Microsoft head office is, and all this kind of stuff. But it was on a path where he was being himself. And I envied that. I didn't want to do something where I couldn't be myself. I wanted to do something where I could bring who I really am to it.
Oh, absolutely. I can imagine if somebody's just presenting to you just their own representative, not the rest of them. By the time that whole catches up, then you see that they're not authentic, to say the least. Now, when you obviously first started working on your mindset and just being conscious of this whole paradigm that you were now entering into, what was the first surprise that you noticed, first of all, about yourself, and then maybe about the people around you?
I think I need to bring the first and the second because they're very interrelated. So the first was, while I was still at Microsoft, I did the Strengths Finder assessment, right, which really kind of taps into who are you uniquely in the world. And it's a product by Gallup. It's now called the Clifton Strengths program. And I did this thing, and I remember seeing my results and going, first of all, oh, I'm unique. I don't know other people who have this profile. And secondly, I went, oh, everybody else is unique. So it didn't make me feel superior. It just made me feel it's okay to be myself. And so that was revolutionary. And I spent a lot of time investing in it, eventually did the expanded report and coached people on it. Even while I was still at Microsoft, I was mentoring people and that kind of thing. And so that came through. But the other turning point was the crisis year, the 2011 that I mentioned.
Yes.
Where I had this narrative, and it just came from the era of my parents. I mean, God bless them, my late parents, beautiful people. But the era they came from, the one thing you were not allowed to be was too full of yourself. You were not allowed to love yourself. In fact, regularly I heard messages like, oh, look at that man, he loves himself too much, And I built this negative correlation between love, self-love especially, and arrogance and all of this, and this kind of being boastful and that sort of thing. And I remember just before my kind of crisis, very early that same year, I was just sitting meditating one morning, and suddenly this thought came into my mind. And the thought was this: you cannot love yourself too much. And a lot of people go, what do you mean? Well, because it wouldn't be love anymore. Because real love is always going to have a generous aspect to it. And so the more you nurture it in yourself, the more you automatically give to others. If it became a selfish thing, that wouldn't be love anymore. And so I began to realize that leadership was in fact love. And that when we've nurtured it in ourselves, it's available to overflow to others, and it will impact everybody around us. And so that was a massive turning point. So number one, I'm unique and it's okay that I'm different. And number two, when I nurture love in myself, I mean, how can I give it to others if I haven't nurtured it in myself first? But when I nurture it in myself, suddenly I have capacity to lead, capacity to be strategic, capacity to, when somebody asks for something, to think, what are the longer term implications if I give it to them? Will it make them dependent on me, or will it grow them to be more owning themselves? And so there's a lot of wisdom that comes through having that capacity of learning to love yourself first, and to the way you interact with others. By taking that self-ownership, you actually generate it and invite it in others, that they can also take ownership of their lives.
Absolutely. I love it. I love that statement that, how can you give that which you don't have? And I don't think it was their fault, Ian. Maybe back in those days, they didn't fly that much. I can even, attest that to my parents, because the first thing they tell you when you go on a plane is put your mask on first, so that you could be able to help those that are around.
Exactly.
So we take too many flights, and I think that's quite normal. So they did the best with what information they had, and they wouldn't have been exposed to that. But I would think that's a belief that would have been obviously ingrained in you, and it would have been so difficult for you to let that go. Now, how did you step into that now? The fact that now you've realized, okay, I can literally love myself enough to pass it on to other people. What was the uptake of all of that with the people now around you? Because you did mention there was a divorce and a fallout in business, and maybe you had really started loving yourself way too much and you forgot you had friends.
I love the line of questioning. So I'm going to start at a very different place from your question and then go to your question. And the place I want to start is this. I began to see when I was doing global leadership development work, and I've now, by the way, worked with leaders from 107 different countries and counting. And as I was doing this, I would see people who would come to training thinking that growth is knowledge and skill. And so they come on the training, they gain a lot of knowledge, they develop some skills, and they actually practice the skills on the training that I was delivering. And then I bump into them a year later and they're not practicing any of it. Or one of their team members comes on the training and says, did my manager do this? Because I didn't see a change. Because knowledge and skill do not change behavior for about 90% of people. There's some people who are quite rarely wired and a lot of self-ownership, where they will take the knowledge and skill and actually own it and implement it. And for me, the key isn't knowledge and skill. Knowledge and skill is secondary. It's important, but it's secondary. What's primary is mindset. If we do not shift the mindset, we will not shift our behavior. You used an airplane example. Can I use another airplane example? Mindsets are like the autopilot in an airplane. If the airplane is going in this direction and you decide you want to go in this direction, you shift the plane. The moment you let go, it goes back to the original direction because the autopilot wasn't changed. But if you shift the autopilot, you turn the knob and it now is going, now no matter what you do, it's going in that direction. So the mindset is the real driver of behavior, not knowledge and skill. And once the mindset has changed, all the needed knowledge and skill becomes really easy. I mean, let's face it, between Google and ChatGPT and Amazon books and YouTube, there's nothing you can't learn today. But you need the mindset. Once the mindset's changed, everything else is easy. And so what happened that morning that I had this realization that it's okay to love myself. And I don't have to fear loving myself because all I need to make sure is that it's always real love. It's not actually becoming something that isn't love. It's becoming something selfish. And Prosper, you won't believe it, but my capacity for others just revolutionarily changed. I have more patience and capacity than ever before because I've learned to love myself. But there was another thing, and I actually put this little up on a Post-it note, but I'm going to show it to you quickly. I'm just going to grab something here. And that is this little sign. And it says that.
My number one job today is me.
And I made that my mantra. Every morning when I woke up, I had this little reminder on the mirror that said, my number one job today is me. And I would open the curtains and look out and go, my number one job today is me. Not my only job, but every day it's for me to build this capacity so that I've got more to give and more to change in other people and more to help other people grow and everything. And so that is my key to life, is I'm not my only job because that would be selfish. I am my number one job so that I'm building that capacity. I'm putting my own oxygen mask on first so that I can take that into the world.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. So if that becomes your number one job, I come across a lot of people that say, I'll do the inner work later. I'll get around to that, because people see the outer shell. So I got to cut my nails, make sure my eyebrows are deep, make sure I'm all nice and shaven. They're not going to see what's on the inside. And if I don't open up my mouth or if I don't say nothing, what they are going to see is that outer shell. What does this really cost people in real life?
the price is unbelievable, Prosper. And you know what's really sad about it is they're actually limiting their own potential. So this is not just that they are kind of delaying, or maybe it's impacting negatively on their parenting or their family or other people around them or whatever it might be. It's actually worse than that, because as you make yourself your number one job, you discover your personal genius that you can bring to the world that maybe otherwise you wouldn't know about. And so the inner journey is not just an inner journey of I'm building this wonderful thing of love and capacity. And by the way, I'm very clear when I say leadership is love and that we nurture love. I'm not talking about niceness, just in case anybody is confused. Okay, because I watched a thing. I think it was recently. It might have been with Simon Sinek. I'm not sure, but he was talking about how the difference between being nice and caring. Because if you are nice and somebody's breath stinks, you won't tell them about it. But if you care, you'll tell them about it. And so when I talk about love, I'm not talking about being nice and fluffy. I'm talking about genuinely caring for the other person. How do you do that if you haven't done it for yourself first? Again, and so this idea of people who say that, oh, I'll do that later. And I come across them. And in fact, I've recently discontinued services for one of my clients who isn't prepared to go on that inner journey. And they're just not ready, and that's okay. And I mean, I haven't closed the door on the relationship, but I'm not gonna play games, because some people are just not ready. I had my 2011 experience, which was so confrontational, the long, dark night of the soul, as they call it, where I realized that this was the mindset. If I didn't change this mindset, if I didn't wake up every day and say, my number one job today is me, I was going to keep getting these results of broken relationships, broken partnerships, broken life. And rather look into that mirror and face that reality and go, oh, shucks, there are pieces of this picture I really don't like. Let me go on a journey to see what I can do with that. But some people are not ready. And if they're not ready, they probably can't be my client.
Absolutely. Now, that brings me to this question now, where, I mean, you've discovered for yourself, you are now on this transformation journey. You've healed yourself. Anybody in their rightful mind would literally just be like, you know what? I think that's it. I'm going to go in and keep doing my stuff with my own inner work. And what is it that made you think you could also help other people achieve this?
I think that underlying drive was always there, a purposeful life. For me, if I'm not making a difference to others, I'm not living a meaningful life, a purposeful life. So I think that drive has always been there. I mentioned StrengthsFinder. My number 2 talent theme in StrengthsFinder is called belief. And I have this kind of strong sense of purpose. And for me to live a life without purpose would be, it's not worth it. I couldn't do that. So there is this drive to want to help other people. And what took me a while to realize, so I'm going to go full circle to the thing you asked me earlier about the drive for the corner office or the fancy car, because what I've now realized is that bringing who I really am to the world can invite a level of prosperity, and does in fact invite a level of prosperity, but it comes from this inner journey. And so, if I look at, for example, my latest book, which is the Egg-Based Leadership book, or the Journal for Liberating Leaders, a lot of this has come from the inner journey and the journey of working with people globally for such a long time. And it's that combination. And that gives me a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. And it's no longer this sort of disconnected, as you said, the Easter egg, the outer shell, the mask that's put on. It's actually one thing that becomes a cohesive whole. And I wouldn't be true to myself if I wasn't helping others. And simultaneously, if I was only helping others and I wasn't investing in myself, it would have a hollowness to it and it would be unsustainable.
I like that. And from what you're saying, my understanding is in life, we're here to live, to learn, and to contribute. So you've obviously lived through the life that has given you that lived experience, and you've gone on to learn a whole bunch about yourself, the strength finders, and things that are now equipping you to be the person that is now here to contribute, to help others be, do, and have that very own existence, and sort of cutting the learning curve for them. But why the name totally Morpheus? I mean, what does waking up really mean in your world?
So there's a story I need to tell about that. And this story goes back more than 20 years. It's in fact, I think 22 years ago, where a group of friends and I, we were just getting together. We were just occasionally just having really quite, deep conversations, but it was serious, but not, so it wasn't just social, but but we were also having fun. And I think we'd been reading the same book or something. And this idea came out of, what if we had a mythical or a mystical name in addition to the name we were born with? And that mythical or mystical name could be a historical character, maybe a movie character, or somebody from a book, or even a cartoon character. It could be anything. It could be a lot of fun. Like for some people, it might be like Joan of Arc, or Napoleon, or whatever it might be. And so we all went away and thought about it. And when we got together again a couple of weeks later, everybody was going, oh, well, I think I'm Samwise Gamgee from The Lord of the Rings, or I think I am, my best friend's wife went, she thinks she's River from the Serenity program, and if you know anything about River, she's dangerous. She's the most lethal of them all. And it's true. Don't touch any of her people. She will kill you, And they got to me and I said, I've been thinking about it for 2 weeks. I have absolutely no idea. And River turned to me and said, but it's so obvious. And I went, what do you mean it's obvious? And she said, but you are Morpheus. And I went, oh, I'd love to be Morpheus. I could never be Morpheus. And then they all turned to me and said, oh, that's so obvious. You are Morpheus. You awaken dreams in others. You are the god of dreams in that sense, small g. You are the one who raises up the leaders and the hero. You are not the hero in yourself. I mean, obviously, there is a profile raise that comes with that. And then even said, you're not the political leader or whatever, but my best one, and this aligns with this belief talent of mine, you are the one who carries on believing when others have stopped believing. And I went, oh my goodness, I would love to be all of those things. And all that needed to happen was I needed to accept it. And my friends already said, but you are already that. And that was part of then my journey, which then took me onto the self-love, self-leadership that has taken me forward.
Absolutely. And
so I am Morpheus.
Yes, and congratulations. What that brings about is the fact that your environment and the people you surround yourself with, I mean, all that we've been trying to extrapolate here is the people that you surround yourself with would either lift you up or they would, sort of put you down. And for those that are watching right now, they might now start be edging themselves on the seats and saying, what is it that you can help them with? If somebody knocks on your internet door right now and they come through, what is it that they can walk away with? I mean, just so that they can understand what Morpheus is offering. Is it the red pill or the blue pill?
And by the way, I very clearly offer both the red pill and the blue pill. And the reason is actually very, very interesting. If people do not understand that there are two pills and they're making a decision, some people will say, oh, well, maybe I'll take the red pill later. That is the worst thing that could happen. I would much rather somebody say, you know what? I'm not ready for this. This isn't for me. I'm consciously taking the blue pill. I'm deciding against what you're doing. And some people just simply, that's okay. They're not ready. It's okay. But what I find is by making a decision, the chances that they'll take the red pill later are dramatically increased. No decision is the worst thing that people could do. And so, yes, I do find people who want to take the red pill, and the red pill. Yes, you leave the matrix, you leave the pseudo world that you've maybe been living in, the hollow egg that you. I love the way you put that. And by the way, egg is a big theme for me too, as you can see, over here.
Yes.
So, but the idea being that if you take the red pill, it's the beginning of a journey. It's not a destination as such. And taking the blue pill is consciously saying, I'm not ready, but it's simultaneously saying, but I now know that there's another way. And so, yes, people do take the red pill. What do they get? Well, we've got a great assessment. It's called the EGG3 Leadership Assessment. And that's often a starting point, whether you're a leader or not. But if you can put yourself into those leadership situations that we deal with there, you're going to discover where you are. And a lot of this is internal. Some of it is external, but most of it is mindsets. And that's what the real driver behind the questions are in the assessment. And the assessment's free, by the way. But you'll now discover, are you in more of a survivor state? In a striver state? And by the way, I was in a survivor state when I went through my 2011 experience. I had at Microsoft been in a striver state. But ultimately, do you want to get into a thriver state where you can then from there launch bringing who you are to your world and to your family and that kind of thing? And so the assessment is a great little starting point. As I say, it's free. And then from that, we've got lovely journeys that people can start to go, oh, that's why I've been doing that all my life. Now I understand. And by fixing that, or by being conscious of that, I become more of a thriver. And the thriver point is a launch point. Now, you can see over here, I've got a dragon. We don't know what's going to be in your egg because we're all unique. Okay. So after the egg is open and you're now a thriver, some people will be eagles. Some people will be falcons. Some people will be doves. I've got a friend who said, no, he's an albatross. And I've got another friend who said, well, absolutely, I'm a dragon. And another one who said, I'm a gecko. And another one who said, I'm an owl, So we don't know what's going to come out because it's going to be based on who you uniquely are. And that's the journey that we invite people on, is to impact their world through being who they really, really are and nurturing that inside of them.
Absolutely. I like the egg analogy. I read somewhere where it says, if an egg is broken from the outside, life ends. But if an egg is broken from the inside, life actually comes to fruition. Now, somebody might be watching this and thinking, there's Morpheus, you're talking about all these different worlds and places. Does this actually work on humans? So maybe you can tell us a real story. You might not go in detail about their names and particular events, but, just someone who came to you stuck and left fundamentally changed. And what is it that actually shifted for them?
So here's my favorite story at the moment, because it's very recent. Some of the developments is a company, a sort of medium-ish enterprise, but they're a multi-country. They've got business in the UK and India and all over Africa and so on. And this particular company, they came to me and they wanted to do the EGG3 assessment. So they did the assessment, but then didn't do any work to develop it. And so when they redid the assessment 18 months later, nothing fundamental had changed, because they hadn't really done any of the work that, and we were still developing some of the tools. We didn't have all the tools yet, which we've now got. Then when they redid it, they went, oh dear, we see we're not really developing, and it's impacting our ability to grow our market share and this kind of thing. So they decided then to embark on what we now offer, which is these pathways where if you come out as a survivor, it's micro learning, literally 3 minutes a day for 15 days. Okay. And by the way, I've seen more transformation from 3 minutes a day for 15 days than people who've attended a 1-week course. It's mind blowing when I see how the impact is. And they had in their last assessment, 7 of their leadership team coming out as survivors. and another 3 of them as what we call strivers. They've just redone the assessment. They no longer have anybody in the survivor state.
Wow.
All of the people in survivor state are now in the thriver state, and some of the people from striver are now in thriver as well. And so the leadership team is now 12 people. 10 of them are in the thriver state and 2 of them in the striver state. But here's what becomes really interesting is the CEO and founder, I was speaking to him actually this week. He was saying to me, the culture has changed. The language in the organization has changed. I've had feedback from his team saying my impact on my community, and specifically the church I'm in, has dramatically changed, or the community political movement, there's something that's changed there. There's a lot of these people have come back to me. Some have come back and said, oh, I now realize I was missing this one skill. And they developed that skill, and then they went to a thriver state as well. But what's the biggest difference is that in 31 years of business, the CEO came to me the other day and said, we've just had our best financial result ever in 31 years of business.
Wow. You see, you're literally giving people back to themselves. And indulge me here for a little bit, Ian, because what you're explaining is somewhat akin to a rite of passage, where you're taking people through a whole new way of transformation that they come out on the other end, transformed. Because if after 31 years, they haven't produced whatever results that you took them through, that change is what was lacking.
Yeah.
And it's like a tap on the shoulder to say, it's your turn to lead now.
Right. Yes, exactly. And that's beautiful. They're not becoming dependent on me. In fact, what they've said is, now we've reached this, our eggs are hatched, we're now in the thriver state. Now we realize the next thing we need is teaming. So they're not becoming dependent on me for what they've done. What they've done, they've owned. They're now saying, can you take us further?
I like that. I like that a lot, because so many people, I believe, are just fully grown babies that are in leadership positions. They've never been given an opportunity to stop and actually start building from the inside. And that is a really big problem for a lot of corporations out there. Now, when we started this conversation, you introduced us to a character, and that was Ian of 2011. If he would show up to you today, right now, what's one thing you would ask him, or what's one belief that you would ask him to just let go of? Because I think now you're traveling a lot lighter than you were back then.
Yeah. I mean, the obvious one is the belief that you're not allowed to love yourself. I think that's probably the most obvious. I would actually add to it, though, and say, from that growth of no longer being held back by not loving yourself, what, as an act of love for yourself, so this is another flip side, I guess, learn the skills, especially the entrepreneurial skills, to be able to take this message further. I think the false belief I had, so maybe this is the false belief. The false belief I had was, because I know I speak quite well and I've got, reasonable voice and all this kind of thing, I just expected people to sort of start throwing money at me to speak, But actually, I had to build a business. And I think the mindset was, I don't come from an entrepreneurial background. There's nobody in my family tree that's entrepreneurial. So I needed to go on board and say, that's great that you're now making that investment and you're now building a message to take to the world. You're going to need a business as a vehicle for that message. Get out of the belief that you're not an entrepreneur. You need to be an entrepreneur to take this to the world.
See, what I'm hearing from all of this is, your real work isn't about fixing people. It's about helping them just remember who they already are. And
if there's any fixing, they're going to do it for themselves. I'm not going to do it for them.
Absolutely. It's just quite interesting, because the more successful someone becomes, right, the more likely they are to start feeling lost because they get caught up, like you were saying, in the whole environment in which they are. Almost like growth without inner alignment creates a whole new kind of pain. And you're just literally saying, hey, there is another way.
Yeah, exactly. You've hit the nail on the head. I couldn't have put it better myself.
Absolutely. Now, I can't thank you enough for the time that we spent on the call today. I know there's a lot that we could talk about, but there are also products that you've got going. You've already talked about the egg assessment. You showed me a couple of books earlier on. Maybe we can just talk a little bit about those.
Yeah, so my first book is called Lead Like Morpheus, obviously. And there will be more in this range because later there will be a team like Morpheus and a couple of other books. There's one called Shift Like Morpheus, which is about transformational leadership, the more legacy leadership and change leadership and culture and that kind of thing. So there's more coming in that field. But what we realized through this EG3 leadership assessment that we do is that people want to journey deeper with those results. And that's where we came up with this journal for liberating leaders, the egg-based leadership approach. And so if people do the assessment, they can find out more information, but they could take, for example, the journal, which we even have available digitally if they want it, and they can then have 250 prompts that will take them deeper on this journey themselves. So in a way, this is a do-it-yourself approach. With a lot of guidance, and yeah, so we have a whole 1 year journey that we can take people on. There's lots and lots of options, but the starting point is always the EG3 leadership assessment, and I think we can give your people a link for that.
Absolutely, I was about to say that. I mean, obviously, it's a lot to take in, and I want to be very clear here for whoever's watching this. Please notice that Ian is not selling motivation. I think he's actually helping people upgrade the operating system they run their entire life on. And if you can imagine, like he mentioned earlier on about the autopilot, if the pilot maybe falls asleep and wakes up and then moves the plane a little bit, it will go back to where it's at because the autopilot is fixated on the particular thing. And if you get any of the products that he's showing right now, I'll put the link in the show notes. And definitely, I can't wait to see what people are going to do with this information. So especially if you're a high performer who feels burnt out, stuck, or you just keep repeating the same emotional patterns, but maybe with, better toys and more comfier clothes, I think that's the kind of work that actually changes the game. Now, Ian, I know you speak to a lot of people and you probably have been on a lot more, podcasts like this. Is there anything I should have asked you today that I didn't ask you?
I think you've asked exceptionally good questions and I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I would just venture that, because you covered all the big ones, by the way, I would just venture to say that the answers that people are seeking are inside of them. And that is the key. The answers that people are seeking are inside of them.
Oh, that is beautiful. You see, the one thing that resonates a lot is you have the reference of the egg, right? So when a chick is growing inside there, it doesn't go to the shop to go buy a beak or to buy clothes or to buy a new coat. No, everything is already within the egg and it just pops out ready after 21 days. So let this be the hatching of amazing human beings out there. And if this has been a phenomenal episode, Ian. I didn't know what to expect, but thank you so much for sharing your journey with us here.
Thank you. I really appreciate you.
Great stuff. For those that are watching right now, if this conversation resonated with you, I encourage you to share this episode with somebody who might be an outward success, but a private failure. A lot of people are just wondering generalities out there and they feel lost. And if somebody has shared this episode with you, give them a hug the next time you see them, because they actually see something in you that you haven't seen. And just make sure you subscribe to the Online Prosperity Show because in the next episode, we're going to be diving into ideas that will help you create not just success, but a happier and more conscious existence. Now, I've got a final question for whoever is watching right now. If you truly woke up from your own matrix, what would be the first thing that you change in your life today? Bye for now.